For over 20 years, Patrick and his younger brother, Daniel, had barely spoken. Once inseparable, their bond had been shattered by a bitter inheritance dispute after their father's passing. What should have been a simple division of land turned into years of resentment, silence, and an invisible wall between them. Patrick, the elder brother, had taken the larger share of their father's land, believing it was his right as the firstborn. Daniel, feeling cheated, had walked away with nothing but his pride, vowing never to return. He moved to the city, built a life for himself, and refused to set foot in the village again. Years passed. Patrick remained on the family land, tending to the farm, raising his children, and hearing only fragments of Daniel's life through distant relatives. Meanwhile, Daniel climbed the corporate ladder in Nairobi, living in a world far removed from the dusty paths of their childhood. Then one day, Patrick fell ill. It started with fatigue, then weight loss, and soon, he couldn't manage the farm anymore. The man who once stood tall and proud now struggled to leave his bed. His children, having moved away to seek their own futures, rarely visited. The house grew quiet, the land overgrown. One afternoon, as Patrick lay weakly under the old mango tree in the compound, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Old man, how are you feeling?" Patrick turned his head, and there, standing at the gate, was Daniel. His younger brother, now a man with graying hair and a lined face, was holding a bag in one hand and a hesitant look in his eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There were no grand apologies, no emotional outbursts. Just the weight of years pressing between them. Then, Daniel sighed, stepped forward, and said, "You look like you need some help around here." And just like that, he stayed. He cleaned up the farm, fixed the broken fence, and even started sleeping in the old family house, the same one he had sworn never to return to. Patrick, too weak to argue, could only watch as his younger brother moved through their father's land, not as an enemy, but as a son returning home. As the weeks passed, the silence between them became easier, lighter. They started talking about the crops, the village, the changes over the years. They never spoke of the past, but in the quiet moments, as Daniel handed Patrick a cup of tea or Patrick pointed out which trees needed pruning, the years of anger began to fade. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Patrick, in a rare moment of vulnerability, said, "I should have been fairer." Daniel, after a long pause, simply nodded. "And I should have stayed." That was it. No elaborate reconciliation. No undoing the past. Just two brothers who had found their way back to each other, not through words, but through time, patience, and the quiet understanding that some wounds heal not with apologies, but with presence. And so, life continued, not as it once was, but as it was meant to be. The months that followed Patrick's illness were a mixture of healing and tension. Daniel, now a fixture at the farm, took charge of the land with an efficiency that surprised even himself. Crops that had withered under Patrick's neglect slowly revived, and the cows, once scrawny and forgotten, grew strong again. But the unease between the brothers remained. The years of resentment did not dissolve overnight. Patrick, though grateful, struggled to let go of control, while Daniel, though determined to help, often felt like an outsider on the land he had once been forced to leave. Then came the letter. It arrived on a bright morning, carried by the village postman who rarely had work these days. Patrick, squinting in the sunlight, tore it open. As he read, his face hardened. Without a word, he handed it to Daniel. It was from a lawyer in Nairobi. Their late father's will had been contested. A cousin, someone they had barely spoken to in years, was claiming that the land rightfully belonged to him. The case had been filed quietly, and now, a court date loomed. "This is nonsense," Daniel muttered, rereading the letter. "How can he challenge something that was never his?" Patrick sighed. "Money. Greed. He must have seen you working here and assumed we were making a fortune." The thought filled Daniel with fury. The land had caused enough division between them. He would not let a stranger take it away. Against Patrick's advice, Daniel traveled to Nairobi to confront the cousin. He found him in a small, cluttered office downtown, sipping expensive whiskey as if he had already won. "I have my rights," the cousin sneered. "The land was meant to be shared among the whole family, not just you two." Daniel clenched his fists. "You never wanted it. You left, just like I did." "Yes, but I came back," the cousin countered. "And I have proof that my father was promised a share." He tossed an old, yellowed document across the table. Daniel's stomach dropped. It was handwritten, bearing their grandfather's shaky signature, suggesting that a portion of the land was indeed meant to be divided. The case wasn't baseless after all. Back at the farm, Patrick was furious. "You should have let the lawyers handle it," he snapped when Daniel told him. Daniel, exhausted from the trip, simply said, "We don't have time to wait." The legal battle dragged on for weeks. Tensions rose. The village buzzed with rumors, and old wounds between the brothers threatened to reopen. Then, one night, Patrick collapsed again. This time, it wasn't illness. It was exhaustion, stress, and the weight of everything they had been through. Daniel, terrified, sat by his hospital bed, feeling a guilt so deep it nearly crushed him. When Patrick awoke, his voice was weak but firm. "Sell it," he whispered. Daniel frowned. "What? The land? Sell it. Let it go." Daniel felt his breath hitch. After everything, after all the fighting, the bitterness, the years lost, Patrick was ready to walk away. And then Daniel realized something. The land had never been the problem. It was the chains they had built around it. The next morning, they made their decision. Rather than let the cousin claim victory, they sold the farm, but not to him. Instead, they found a young couple passionate about agriculture, willing to carry on the legacy of the land while making it their own. With the money, Patrick and Daniel bought a modest house in town. No farms, no battles, just a simple place to share the years they had left. One evening, as they sat on their new veranda, Daniel turned to his brother. "Do you regret it?" Patrick stared at the sky, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "No," he said. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel realized he did too. They had spent a lifetime fighting for the land, only to discover that what truly mattered was each other. If this story captivated you, be sure to subscribe to Tales by Ready for more thrilling stories such as this. Share your views in the comments below. See you in the next one.